£15,000. Not a car, not a deposit on a car. That is the exact fine, in cash, that a manufacturer owes the British government for every single non-electric car it sells above its allowance this year. And that number is not a threat, and it is not a worst-case scenario dreamed up to scare an industry. It is written into regulation, in force right now, in the middle of this exact year. Read that again, because the number that gets repeated in the press is almost never the number that actually matters. What matters is this. 1 in every 3 new cars sold in Britain in 2026 has to be fully electric, by law, or the manufacturer starts paying. Not 1 in 3 of the cars you might want. 1 in 3 of every single car that leaves a UK forecourt with a number plate on it this year. If you are planning to buy any new car in the next 12 months, electric, petrol, or diesel, stay with me to the end, because this rule was written to change the behavior of manufacturers, but the way it actually plays out, it changes the price on the windscreen in front of you, whichever type of car you are looking at. Here is the assumption almost everyone makes when they hear about this, and it is a completely reasonable one. It sounds like a manufacturer problem. A regulatory compliance issue happening somewhere in a boardroom, nothing to do with the actual person standing on a forecourt deciding between 2 cars. That assumption is wrong, and once you understand the mechanism underneath it, you will never look at a new car price the same way again. This is called the Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate, and it came into force back in January 2024. It sets a rising percentage of electric cars every manufacturer must sell in Britain each year, measured against their total sales. 22% in 2024, 28% in 2025. This year, 2026, it jumped again to 33%. Next year it climbs to 38, then 52, the year after that, then 66, then 80% by the end of the decade. Read that progression again slowly, because it is not a gentle slope. It is a curve that gets steeper every single year, and manufacturers do not get to opt out of it. So how does a car company hit a number like that when a large part of the British public still is not choosing electric on their own? It cannot force you to buy one. What it can do is make the electric car in the showroom look extremely attractive, and make the petrol or diesel car next to it look considerably less so. That is the mechanism, and it has a name in the industry. Cross-subsidization. A manufacturer that is behind on its target will quietly, sometimes not so quietly, discount its electric models heavily, in some cases by several £1,000s against list price, purely to shift enough units to avoid the fine. And that discount has to come from somewhere. It comes from the margin the manufacturer would otherwise be protecting on the petrol and diesel cars sitting right next to it on the same forecourt. Your electric neighbour's discount is being paid for, in part, by the price you are quoted on a combustion engine car this year. Nobody puts that on a sign in the showroom. But it is sitting inside every single price you are given in 2026, whichever type of car you walk in wanting to buy. Now, if a manufacturer simply cannot hit 33%, even with heavy discounting, what happens next is where the £15,000 figure comes back in. For every car sold over their allowance, they owe that amount directly to the government. Not a suggestion, not a target missed quietly. A cash penalty per car, calculated and enforced. Multiply that by even a few hundred cars and you are looking at a bill running into the millions for a single manufacturer in a single year. And that is before you consider that some manufacturers sell hundreds of thousands of cars in this country annually. The incentive to avoid that fine, by any legal means available, is enormous. And discounting electric models, while quietly protecting margin elsewhere, is the least painful lever most of them have. Here is where it gets more interesting, and more current, because this has been shifting under pressure in real time. Manufacturers pushed back hard on how aggressive this mandate was, particularly after tariff pressure from the United States made the wider financial picture harder for several of them, and reports through the middle of this year suggest the government has quietly softened parts of the scheme in response. The fine per car has reportedly been reduced from £15,000 down to £12,000 in places, and manufacturers have been given more room to borrow against future years, extended out to 20, 30, buying themselves breathing space rather than paying immediately. On the surface, that sounds like relief. But think about what a softened penalty actually signals to the manufacturers still trying to hit that 33% target honestly, through real electric sales rather than paperwork. It tells them the target is negotiable if you push hard enough and loudly enough, which raises an uncomfortable question about how firm any of these numbers really are for anyone trying to plan a purchase around them. Picture two manufacturers side by side to see how differently this actually plays out. One of them committed early, years before this mandate ever became law, to going fully electric well ahead of the government's own deadline. For that manufacturer, 33% this year is not a stretch target. It is a number they cleared with room to spare, which means they have no urgent need to discount anything to hit it, and their pricing this year looks broadly stable across their entire range. The other manufacturer is still leaning heavily on a handful of popular petrol and diesel models that account for the bulk of their UK sales, with electric versions that have been slower to catch on with buyers than they hoped. That second manufacturer is the one discounting aggressively on its electric models right now, and quietly protecting margin everywhere else, because it genuinely cannot afford the fine if it falls short. Two manufacturers, two completely different pricing strategies this year, and the difference between them has almost nothing to do with which one builds a better car. It comes down entirely to which one bet correctly on how fast Britain would actually switch. And this is not a hypothetical pressure sitting only in spreadsheets. It has already cost real jobs on real production lines. Stellantis pointed directly at this mandate when it confirmed the closure of its Luton plant, putting around 1,100 jobs at risk, saying publicly that the mandate was hurting its business model because consumer demand for electric cars simply was not matching what the law required it to sell. That is not a manufacturer complaining in the abstract. That is a British factory, closed, with a specific piece of regulation named as the reason. So where does all of this actually leave you? Standing in a showroom later this year, trying to work out whether you are getting a genuine deal or walking into someone else's compliance strategy. A few things are worth checking before you sign anything. First, if you are looking at an electric car, ask directly whether the discount you are being offered is tied to the manufacturer's own annual sales target, and specifically ask whether that discount is guaranteed to still be there if you order today, but the car is not registered until next year, because the mandate resets its percentage every single January, and a discount built around this year's pressure can simply disappear on the first of the month after the deadline passes. Second, the pressure to hit the target compounds hardest in the final quarter of the year, which means genuinely aggressive electric car discounting tends to appear from around October through December, as manufacturers scramble to close the gap before the annual count resets. If you can wait until then, you are negotiating from a position of real leverage rather than politeness. Third, if you are buying petrol or diesel this year, do not assume the sticker price is neutral. Ask the dealer directly whether that specific model is one the manufacturer is trying to protect margin on to offset electric discounting elsewhere. Because on some models, there is genuinely less room to move than there was 2 years ago, and knowing that going in changes how hard you can reasonably push. Fourth, and this one matters most if you are on finance, remember that the underlying list price used to calculate your monthly payments is not the same thing as the discount headline you are being shown. So always ask for the on-the-road price before any manufacturer contribution is applied, because that is the number your finance agreement is actually built around once the current pressure eases. Step back from the showroom for a second and look at what this whole system is actually doing, because it is worth understanding properly rather than just reacting to it. The mandate was never designed to punish ordinary buyers. It was designed to force an entire industry to move faster toward electric than it would have chosen to on its own, using the manufacturer's own profit margins as the lever, rather than taxing drivers directly the way the road tax changes did. In that sense, it is a genuinely different kind of policy to the one we looked at recently, aimed upstream at the companies rather than downstream at the driver. And there is a reasonable argument that this is exactly how it should work, that the businesses building the cars should carry the cost of the transition rather than the people simply trying to get to work every morning.
But policies aimed upstream still find their way downstream eventually, through pricing, through discounting, through which models get pushed hardest on the forecourt this particular month. You are not the target of this law. You are still standing directly in its path. So here is the open question worth sitting with as this climbs toward 38% next year and 52% the year after that. If manufacturers are already softening under pressure at 33%, what happens at 80%, the number this mandate is legally supposed to reach by the end of the decade? Does the pressure ease every single time an industry pushes back hard enough, or does the target eventually become the one thing in this entire system that does not move? Nobody currently has a confident answer to that, including, I suspect, the people who set the schedule in the first place. Tell me in the comments whether you have already been offered a heavier than usual discount on an electric car this year, because if you have very likely just seen this mandate working in real time, whether the dealer told you that or not. And if you are holding off on a petrol or diesel purchase because the price on the window has felt higher than it should this year, tell me the model, and I will tell you honestly whether that is the mandate showing up in your quote. If this changed how you are going to negotiate your next car, send it to someone who is about to walk onto a forecourt this year completely unaware of any of it, because right now, most buyers still are. There is a related change coming for anyone thinking about switching to a plug-in hybrid instead of going fully electric, and almost nobody has connected the dots on it yet.